Welcome everyone to HJI's virtual faculty roundtable. My name is Stephen Boyd and I'm the Dean of Enrollment Management and Student Life here at HJI. In this setting, faculty members of HJI are invited to speak about an academic topic or an area of research of interest to the greater HJI community. We're very happy to have you with us here today. We have people from the New York City area, from various parts of the United States, and also from different countries around the world. So thank you to all of you who have made the time to join us this evening for this very important gathering. Questions that you have during the presentation will be received through the chat box at the bottom of your screen. So when you have a question during the presentation, you're welcome to put it in the chat box, and they will be directed to our speaker and to our host at the appropriate moment in the program. Before we proceed any further, I just want to point out that we're so pleased that you could come today for this topic, but we also hope that through these presentations we present monthly, that each of you come to have a better understanding of the meaning and the role of HJ International Graduate School for Peace and Public Leadership as a center of thought and as a promoter of important discussions around these important contemporary issues. So as a result, I will be putting my contact information into the chat box, along with certain links to our website about our programs of study. And if you are inspired to do so, we would welcome your application to any of our degree programs, or even just to take one course. So look into the chat box later in the program for that information. To begin our program, I would like to introduce our president, Dr. Thomas G. Walsh, who is going to be our host this evening. He's going to offer welcoming remarks. Dr. Walsh is the 7th president of HJI International Graduate School for Peace and Public Leadership. A 1979 graduate of HJI, Dr. Walsh went on to earn his PhD at Vanderbilt University School of Religion, where he specialized in the study of religion and ethics. Since his graduation, Dr. Walsh has taught courses at several colleges and universities, as well as at HJI, where he is currently teaching co-teaching a course together with Reverend Damian Dunkley. Dr. Walsh has worked closely with HJI co-founders Reverend Sung Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon in the establishment and in the leadership of the Universal Peace Federation, as many of you know, where for many years he served as international chair. Dr. Walsh has edited more than 20 books and publications for the Universal Peace Federation, and he serves as executive editor of Dialogue and Alliance, an academic journal indexed by the American Theological Library Association. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Thomas Walsh.
Well, thank you very much, Dean Stephen Boyd, our Dean of Enrollment Management and Student Life, who's such an essential part of our HJI community. Thank you, everyone, for joining what I believe is a very important program presented by one of our esteemed faculty members. This series of faculty roundtable programs since I came into my position as president of HJI has been a real highlight and very important, I think, for my own education and growth in understanding from a wide range of perspectives, critical issues of our time and deeper insights, whether they're theological or philosophical or geopolitical. They've been very, very stimulating and give evidence of our commitment at HJI to be, we call it a home for thought, a home for conversation about the critical issues of our time and applying principles, particularly of our founders, in an effort to resolve many of the problems our world is facing, one of the most dramatic being, of course, conflict. And we find no lack, unfortunately, of conflict. So as we turn our attention to Africa at this time and address serious matters related to the Sahel region, We also keep in mind that HJI has a deep commitment to looking at and analyzing, assessing, and looking for solutions or ways to improve the situation in Northeast Asia, particularly at the Korean Peninsula. We've been active for 30, 40 years in the Middle East with concerns about, of course, relationship between Israelis and Palestinians, and we've seen that in a horrific way overflow into a most terrible situation. Concerned about what's happening in the interface between Europe and Eurasia, between Russia and Ukraine, and any number of areas that we are concerned about. We have a unique approach to peace where we seek to apply religious principles to an understanding of what gives rise to conflict and how religion may play a role in peace building and resolving conflict and moving us toward reconciliation. So I think tonight will be a very important step in affirming our commitment to promoting peace throughout the world based on a realistic understanding of what's going on. And in this case, the Sahel region of Northern Africa, and we'll learn more about that through our speaker. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Idrissa Kone as a friend and colleague here at HJI. He's currently Associate Professor of Conflict Resolution and Ministry at HJI and teaches a variety of courses in the areas of ministry and peace studies. He obtained his BA in education in the Ivory Coast in West Africa, exactly in the nearby region of where we will be discussing this evening. He studied at the Houphouët-Boigny University, graduated in 2007, and served as a teacher after graduation. He came to America in 2008, earned an MDiv degree at HJI 2012, and he also earned a Master of Arts in Diplomacy at Norwich University with a concentration in conflict management. He obtained the DMin degree with a concentration in peace and justice at HJI in 2016. Dr. Kone's research focuses on transformational leadership and effective management of cross-cultural conflict between communities. Very apropos to tonight's discussion. In August 2020, Dr. Kone was appointed director of the Doctor of Ministry program at HJI. I welcome Dr. Idrissa Kone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Walsh, Mr. President, for hosting this presentation. I also want to recognize all the guests, Muslim guests who are fasting. This is the holy month of Ramadan. I want to recognize them because it's important. And yeah, this is a topic that is dear to me because I've been researching for a few months now in this area, and I'm planning to publish an article maybe by the end of this year. So yeah, I hope tonight can be a great opportunity, learning opportunity for all of us who are attending this this presentation, and that would be great to also you know, get some information that can help improve even the paper in the future as well. So my presentation has two parts. The first part will be presenting Africa, more specifically the Central Sahel region, because it's important to know where it's located exactly in Africa, and how the collapse of the Libyan state contributed to the radicalization of Islamic group in the region. We will look at as well other factors, social and economic factors, and how the international community, so the international community, I mean French, the UN, AU, role into that area, the United States, of course, contribution there, and definitely Russia, okay? And the second part will be, to look at a little bit what is going on right now with the African political activists, and how they influence young people on the continent, and how, what should the international community do about it? Okay, so Africa is a big continent. It's a continent, and about 11.7 million square miles and 1.4 billion populations. It's 54 countries, and Africa was colonized in the 19th century, and then you can see other like Spain, France, and Portuguese. They were all there to share in multiple pieces the continent. And as today, it's the youngest. It's the continent that has the youngest population in the world, with 70% under 30 years old, and more specifically in sub-Saharan Africa, which is this area. Now, it's important to know that the Central Sahel region is in West Africa area and is bordered by Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, as you can see here. And these countries are former French colonies. And majority Muslim. Niger, for example, has 99% Muslim, and 94% in Mali. Burkina Faso, 62%. Most of the populations follow Sunni Islam and many practice Sufi tradition. So since gaining its independence in the 60s, most African nation actually get independent in the 60s. Many countries in the Sahel region actually have experienced political instability and violent extremism. And the main cause before what we're experiencing now in the last 10 years come from actually illegitimate governance, economic decline, worsening effect of climate change. But the last decade is significant because the issues start transcending national borders and posing significant challenges to countries both in and outside the region. For example, in 2015, there was even a terrorist attack in the southern part of Ivory Coast, which was very significant. So the Sahel remained a principal transit point for migrants traveling from sub-Saharan Africa to Europe, passing through Libya and Algeria and getting to Spain, which is another issue that is rising as well and need to be addressed maybe in a different context. Militant Islamists in Central Sahel have, of course, political, economic, but also ideological objectives. They usually target state authorities, and those who are perceived to be collaborating with them, maybe any kind of organization or group. Let's say if the United States is supporting one government, and then there will be actually also targeted by those radical groups. They usually use violence to secure and control over access to lucrative mine and trade right, which is purely economic. And they actually violate the right of freedom of religion, which is purely ideological, for freedom of religion of belief, which is outlined under international law. So the current situation that we facing in Central Sahel is associated with the collapse of the Libyan state in 2011. In 2010-11, many young people from the Arab nations and other places in Central Sahel came to Libya to fight with the crisis that was going on in Libya. And after Gaddafi was killed, and the Libyan state collapse, it led to the proliferation of weapons and armed fighters in the region. So most of them moved to the central Sahel area. And that influx of extremist group went to northern Mali and reignited a dormant situation that, the Tuareg rebellion that was dormant since the 1960s, actually. And they organized themselves as the National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad. Azawad is like a region where the Tuaregs used to live, and it's just a 10% population of northern in Mali. In northern Mali, they wanted to actually separate and have their own state or nation, which didn't happen. And the MLA actually aligned themselves with international Islamic groups such as Al-Qaeda, the Movement of Unity with Jihad in West Africa, Ansar Din, Islamic State group known as ISIS. And those organizations are internationally recognized as terrorist groups. So other social and economic factors that contributed to the rise of radicalization as well is persistent weak governance in the area, corruption, democratic backsliding, legitimacy deficit for leaders in power sometimes, and serious human rights violation. The Sahel countries are constantly ranked high on the Fragile State Index, particularly Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And those countries experienced a combined 25 successful military coups between 1960 and 2022. So in 2013, when those terrorist groups were taking territories in Mali, advancing toward the capital city, the Malian government, the interim president at that time, his name was President Traoré, actually called the French forces to come and help. So the French forces came under the Operation Serval, and they were actually successful in stopping the progress of the terrorist group, and later transformed into Operation Barkhane. The Operation Barkhane succeeded by the establishment of the UN Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali. And in 2020, March 2020, there was a support from the European Union led task called Takuba. And by the end of 2020, France has deployed 5,100 troops in the region, supported by 15,000 UN peacekeepers from around the world, which is quite a lot. After a decade of intervention, international presence in the region, Islamic groups in the Sahel region continue to spread, even beyond the Sahel region. So that led to a growing unpopularity of France and its former colonies in that area, and also led to a failed anti-terror and stabilization effort, unfortunately. So France and its European allies, when the situation became tense, difficult, they have to withdraw their military forces from Mali in August 2022, and later from Burkina Faso in February 2023, and from Niger in December 2023. And all these three countries has a military coup that military leaders are in power right now. So the US has been present as well in the region, and the US military has deployed about 1,500 troops in the region. They're building a drone base in Niger as a platform for striking against terrorist groups across West and the Northern Africa. The United States also remain a top donor of humanitarian assistance, providing military training such as the Flintlock program, which is an anti-terrorist program, and delivering millions of dollars of arms to the region. Recently, unfortunately, the ties between the United States and countries in the Sahel region have also worsened. Following the military coup, the Biden administration suspended the country's free trade access to the US market, which was a very difficult thing for those countries. And the large scale of human rights issues are also triggered laws that prohibited the provision of US military or training assistance to the country of concern. And more importantly, the US official expressed concern about the Wagner Group, which is a mercenary Russian group that is helping, unofficially helping the military, the president leaders, military leaders in the region. So that helped us talk a little bit about how Russia is getting into the Sahel region. This past year, Russia has doubled down its focus on Africa Sahel region, and Russian military advisor arrived in Mali in late 2021 after the country's second military coup. Primarily through the Wagner Group, Moscow has provided the country with a 400-strong contingent of mercenaries to combat jihadist group. In mid-2022, it delivered armed shipment, and however, Mali's security situation continued to deteriorate, and the resurgence is spreading. And the government of Mali does not officially recognize the presence of Wagner in the region, in this country. In spring 2020, Wagner and local military forces orchestrated an anti-terror operation in the country that killed about 400 civilians. And in January 2023, the UN expert advocated for an independent investigation into potential war crimes and crimes against humanity in that zone. The expert claimed that a climate of terror and complete impunity characterized the Wagner Group's activity in the region. And one example is the Mura massacre in March 2022, which is a village where 500 civilians were killed and about 100 women and young girls were actually sexually abused. In July 2023, the United States accused Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin of orchestrating Mali's decision to expel the UN forces and the French forces to advance Russia's political interest. And neighboring country like Burkina Faso has denied contracting with Wagner, even though they recognize that Russia is still a strategic ally. And the war in Ukraine clearly has not diminished Russia's desire to invest in Africa. In early February 2024, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov cited American and French colonialism as the main reason for global inequities. He pointed out the West's disproportionate power in international affairs. According to Lavrov, Moscow remains supportive of African effort to push back against the West. Working with foreign partners in Africa to counter what Lavrov called European colonialism is officially part of Russia's foreign policy at this point. And when the international community is actually fighting to advance the geopolitical interests in the region, the extremist violence groups is actually growing and in the Sahel region. And according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED, the first 7 months of 2023 saw at least 7,800 civilian deaths. This data contradict the claim that the military leaders in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are effectively tackling the insecurity issue. That's conclude my first part. And, Dr. Walsh, I will give back, the floor to you for any further discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Coney. I think this is kind of a moment of pause in your presentation, and you'll soon come to part 2 of the presentation. I think you may need to stop screen sharing, might be helpful. Okay. And all right. Good. Anyway, very valuable content, and I think a very comprehensive overview to understand the implications of the fall of the Gaddafi regime in Libya and its impact, and the Tuareg people who then fled Libya, I think, and there were many weapons that came out of that conflict and instability. You talked about the failing state index, and it is true that the nations are kind of looked at. Are they fragile
Yeah.
level? Are they failing, or even some called failed states? And this region, I would say, is fragile, as they say, from Senegal to Djibouti in the Horn of Africa. We know the struggles in Sudan and South Sudan, as well as the Horn of Africa. And you yourself have, growing up in Ivory Coast, studying there, and although not technically part of the Sahel, very close to Burkina Faso, and just wondering how you had experiences during civil outbreaks in Abidjan and Ivory Coast. Any reflections on your own personal experience
Yeah,
that might be relevant?
yeah, different. Yeah, in Ivory Coast, interestingly, most West African nations kind of face similar challenges in terms of heritage. I would guess the colonial heritage, and the French-speaking countries mostly known as Francophone. So Ivory Coast went through two major civil war. One started in 2022. I think I was there. Then the second one I wasn't there. It was 2011. But the first one, my experience was, very difficult because this was the first time I could see like so many people dying on the street and killings. It was quite dramatic. And the main reason for the conflict, the crisis in Ivory Coast wasn't specifically religious. It was mostly political. I think what happened is, even though it has religious implications and ethnic religious, because in the northern side of Ivory Coast is majority Muslim and the southern is majority Christian. And it looks like the people who rebels against the government that time were majority Muslims and with a specific ethnic group that is associated to it. And I'm part of that background as well. So my experience was basically, if you were from the north and then you live in the south, you were targeted to be a rebel, which was my case, where I was arrested, put in jail, and tortured as well. And if you were from the south and you find yourself in the north, you will be considered as somebody who was coming to do some kind of espionage, and then you will be arrested and get in trouble, or even sometimes killed. So it was extreme from both sides in many ways. So that's what I can say about it. It's very unfortunate. And 10 years later, the issue rise again because for political reason, election didn't go well. And then it created 3,000, death again. But the country is getting back to normal. And the current president is trying to focus on economic development, which is a good thing as well.
Yeah, and you often are in Ivory Coast as a guest lecturer, so you're highly viewed as a prominent scholar, including with your recent publications. I had the opportunity to travel quite a few times to, of course, Ivory Coast, but Burkina Faso, Mali, Bamako, and Niamey, and Niger, and even our HCI founder, Dr. Hakcha Hamoun, traveled to Mali and Niamey, particularly in, I think, 2019, had a very close relationship with former President Issoufou Mahamadou, who was close to the United States. They had a military agreement for, I think, the Sahel 5 nations to try to maintain stability, and our conferences were aimed at that. I remember in 2019, there were representatives of the African Union was there. I think the Chad president was president or chairman of the African Union at that meeting. Prime Minister Sisi of Egypt was there, and I think particularly of Briggy Rafini, who's the prime minister of Niger, and took the reins of Sensad, the community of Saharan and Sahel nations that had previously been chaired precisely by Gaddafi, and was seeking to. So I have a lot of sadness in my heart to see, because at that time, Universal Peace Federation, an affiliated, associated organization with HJI, was very active. In fact, we were addressing problems of the rise of extremism, and that's one of the projects we had going with Sensad at that time. So to see that fall apart, and you mentioned how many players, it's, whether it's a new scramble for Africa, but certainly the various powers that have means are seeking their own gain, whether it's the Wagner Group, Prigozhin in Russia. Prigozhin, of course, met his own demise after rebellion. But anyway, I think you put it well, of the different players involved, and that it's not only internal conflict, but then it gets exacerbated by these various factors. Maybe before you go into your next part, any comment you want to make about the regional powers, the role of ECOWAS? Because once again, Goodluck Jonathan, who was a special envoy to this area on behalf of ECOWAS, and then there's the African Union itself.
Well, the ECOWAS and African Union. Okay, what is going on right now? ECOWAS has difficulties as well, because first of all, the G5 Sahel group, like, it's dismantled, because some countries don't want to be part of it anymore, because they believe that it's being influenced by the former colony for other purposes, French government interest and other stuff. And it's the same situation with ECOWAS as well, and in the AU, because those groups who are withdrawing from the regional organization believe that the former colonial power, is influencing to make the situation worse. And even more complicated, they believe that they will never make it if France is still involved, because it's funding the organization, so it has power, and the sanctions didn't work. That's another issue. Whenever there was a military coup and ECOWAS came with sanction, those sanctions were drastic for people, not for the government is coming to power. So it didn't work well as the best solution to the issues that's being faced. And then finally, we get back to the same cycle of the terrorist organizations getting more power, because the focus is moved to where the fighting between those who supporting ECOWAS activity and those who don't support it, and then the terrorist group are making their way through, which is not a good thing as well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think in your next part, you're going to point us in the direction that we should go to try to mitigate some of these terrible situations. That these applications apply not just to the Sahel region, but globally. I'm sure the principles and practices that you may raise in the next section. So I'm going to give it back to you, Dr. Coney, for part 2 of your presentation.
Okay, great. So, all right. So my second part has I want to talk about this. This is a current situation that is very important. We have some African activists. Many of them you live in Europe, in Africa, and even in somewhere else in the United States. They have a strong voice through social media, and they have thousands of followers. And they can actually influence a lot of young people. Here is their narratives, which is very important. They say they accuse France of being, France is accused of being an imperial country and still, using colonialism to actually exploit Africa. That's one thing. And they will actually say the West's presence in Central Sahel is not to combat terrorism per se, but to exploit the natural resources. Okay. And the killing of a Gaddafi was planned by the West, especially with the participation of NATO, to reinforce military presence in Africa. And French troops being accused of protecting terrorist groups, providing them weapons in Mali. And the current government of Mali said that they have refutable evidence that French troops have been providing weapons to terrorist groups and protecting them in the Sahel region, and they want to bring that to the Security Council, the UN Security Council, which I believe never happens. So this is, and a lot of young people strongly believe, because this is the power of social media as well. They also strongly advocate for the alliance of the Sahel state, which is Mali, Burkina Faso, and Nigeria, which happened recently as a confederate state. It was January 2024, and they believe this is the starting point for the future of United States of Africa. Okay, and they believe the new partnership with Russia and China is much better because it's free from the imperial system, because they believe China and Russia never colonized African nations. So even Russia supported some African nation in the 60s to get their independence. So they won't actually, they might get some kind of a win-win partnership compared to the West. Africa states in the Sahel region might seek their own sovereignty by getting rid of the colonial currency, which is the franc CFA in the Francophone countries. And then no foreign military presence should be, seen anymore in those colonies. The French military presence has to be dismantled. And also no interference in presidential election in Africa, because they believe that the government of France is influencing the election of some type of president so that they can maintain the Western interest, and then maintain poverty for the African people, or support and maintain some dictators in power for several years without helping with changing the condition, the social condition and social and economic condition of the people of Africa. And the last thing is no imposition of French language as a national language anymore. They want to be free to have, Russians or China or English or Korean to be a part of the whole. It shouldn't be only French as a national language, but other, language. I think this is the narrative of those activists, African activists, and their voices being heard by a lot of young people, because those young people, many Africa's going through a lot of difficulties for sure in terms of economic development, poverty. So they think that this could be a way out for, development. Now, what should be the international community posture into all this? It's clear that Washington and its partner in the Sahel region have tough choices to make. The Biden administration seems unwilling and unable to push Russia out of the region. It's clear that all tools such as French counterterrorism operations have failed. So there is still there is a little desire for the US military footprint on the continent to grow any further. So countries across the continent do not want the United States and Europe to impose partner upon them, which is interesting, in terms of the geopolitical aspect of things. And recent language from Western capitals about a zero-sum geopolitical competition on the continent have made the situation even worse. Many African governments have rejected the US and the European demand that they pick side in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, even the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict as well. And then the pressure to take side in international politics have stoked the anger and historic resentment toward the West. And Russia is using that as an opportunity to invest more into Africa. So the most important issue for African is not actually Russia or China at this point, but even how to improve security, economic, and social condition. I strongly believe that most of these military leaders who are seeking opportunity, they really want change. And the Wagner Group may offer an easy fix and help individual regime consolidate their power, but addressing the true causes, the root causes of regional instability is really key. Bad governance, human suffering, devastating impact of climate change, armed jihadist group require a well-resourced multilateral solution. It can be just a one group or one country issue. And also, it's important for greater diplomatic and technical support to be presented without political agenda, because sometimes that become an issue. And ECOWAS and African Union must be the regional organization that should support the return of civilians rule in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and other places. I don't think it's smart for the international, like the France and other European countries or United States to be too much involved in that. Then the interpretation change become like, okay, it's, they're trying to actually, it's an imperial approach to the situation. Africans are more concerned with improving their social economic condition than any ideology. And Islamic radicalization must be addressed from a multiple and global perspective, because African nations, they must send their own troops to fight terrorism. I don't think it's a smart idea to send the US troop on the ground or the French troop on the ground. Is not working well. And I don't even think that the Russian troops should be there. Wagner should not be there. And especially when it's a mercenary group, which is not even officially recognized. They can perpetrate all kind of killings without crime, without and then without being punished for it. So I strongly believe the international community can provide technical support and resources, but the Africans must organize themselves to fight their local issues with the support of the international community. But for a long-term approach, education is key for people to understand how the world works. Without proper education, people don't understand how things work in the world. And women empowerment is an important matter, because it will help women have freedom of choice, so that they don't get exploited and used in different ways. Creating jobs for the youth is also an important matter, because those young people won't get into the jihadist group and terrorist groups just to get $50 a month so that they can survive. Of course, if unemployment rate is high, young people are seeking all kinds of means to be able to survive. And good governance is also a major important issue for me. It comes down to two important elements. It's transparency in managing public resources. That's key. And also it's accountability. If a leader is elected and the Constitution say it's 2 terms, after 2 terms, they need to leave power. They don't have to try to change the Constitution, which is very common. in those countries to change the constitution for another third term, fourth term, and sometimes stay in power for 30 years. That's a big problem. And finally, I will actually advocate for interfaith dialogue. Of course, most Muslims in the region are peaceful, Christians as well, but that's only when there is no crisis. When there is a crisis, people tend to hold on their non-negotiable, and they will probably react in a way that is not always helpful. So that conclude my second part presentation, and get back to you.
Well, once again, very well done, Dr. Kone, and you've given us some good points to work toward to try to resolve such conflicts, particularly in this case in the Sahel region. I just have a quick question. I think you've underscored the geopolitical wider context, the various powers at play, including Russia, China, the United States, the regional powers. And I would say for the Sahel, it's not exactly an interreligious quarrel, but I wonder if there's a dimension of what might be called an intra-religious, or within Islam itself. Is there in a need of a dialogue to move toward some Islamic peace movement that can resolve these problems? And I think there are resources there, from my time in Senegal with the Sheikh Mansour Diouf and the Murad Brotherhood, and even the ancient Mali kingdom from the 13th to the 17th century was considered very peaceful oriented. And I'm wondering if this is also a kind of a struggle within, like we say in America, we're fighting for the soul of our nation. Sometimes we're polarized. Do you see that in a need within Islam for a kind of a struggle for its true soul?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not even a current matter. This has been part of Islam development since the early days of Islam, since the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The successions issues that's come out since the early days of Islam, with who should succeed Muhammad, with Abu Bakr, his best friend, or Ali, his son-in-law, and that went on with Sunni and Shia separations over time. It became even more complicated because within even Sunni ramification comes, within Shia ramification comes. But the main issue with this is when the Wahhabi groups, which is quite radical, start rising, not just in not just in Africa, but in many other places in the world, that become a serious problem. So there is a need for intra-dialogue to be ongoing, for sure. But the issue is they also target non-Muslims, the radical groups. They target like moderate Muslim, but non-Muslim as well, which is complex. So it has to be altogether intra-dialogue, but also inter-religious dialogue as well. And one issue is it's hard to dialogue with radical groups, okay? Because radicalism is quite interesting because it's extreme views on issues. It's sometimes non-negotiable aspect of thing, and violence is one aspect of it. Hatred even can get on the way. If you don't see like me, or you don't do like me, then you don't deserve to be even alive sometimes. And also there's quite rejections of science sometimes, and sometimes rejection of even the Western understanding of reality. But the intercultural, interreligious aspect of things try to integrate and say, you know what, we don't have to accept everything, but we think that this can be beneficial to our nation or country, even if it's coming from the West. So that's what happened with Boko Haram. To just say some few words about Boko Haram in northern Nigeria and other places like Togo and Benin area. So they just kind of reject everything that is coming from the Western world, which is quite radical. The education system has to be rejected and everything that's come with it. So to make my point, of course, there is an intra-dialogue need, but also beyond, it has to go in interreligious as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Coney. Well, Dr. Coney, you've really taken us on a very important journey to the Sahel region and the conflicts there, the hopes for some form of reconciliation, and your background and your commitment to peace studies and conflict transformation is so very relevant. We've learned a lot this evening, evidenced by the good turnout and the many very, very stimulating questions. I offer you any final comment you'd like to make at this time before we close for the evening.
Yeah. So I just want to, say that I believe we're living in a world that is, the world is changing, mostly through new technologies. Social media today is a big, has a big influence on African today. Whatever happens here, when I post on my Facebook page, people in my village can see it. And when somebody posts something in my village on social media, I can see it from here. And sometimes live or stream can be seen all over the places in the world. So my sense is we need to come out with great narrative that can bring integrative solutions, so that we don't create opportunity for the extreme voice to be louder. Even if it's a small group that is louder, people tend to believe that's the right way to go. So that will be my insight, so that, SJI and all the great peacemakers, peacekeepers, and, professors who we got to make our voice on social media today, so that we can bring some ideas there that can actually support the best way to resolve problems that we are facing in the world.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to conclude on. Once again, great program. I'd like to now turn it back over to Dean Stephen Boyd to close this out for the evening.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kone, for an excellent presentation. Really engaging. We had as Dr. Walsh pointed out, a very numerous attendance tonight, and everyone stayed on the call. So thank you so much for such an engaging presentation and providing such important background on this issue and related issues. And Dr. Walsh, thank you for coming again tonight, taking time out of your busy schedule. We know that you are our president. You have a lot of things on your plate, but your presence adds so much to the discussion on this and other topics that we've covered here. So to everyone who came tonight, in the coming days, we will have a recording of our presentation up on our homepage. You'll see it available on the image itself that advertises this event, probably in the next 2 or 3 days. It will also appear on our HCI YouTube channel. All you have to do is go to YouTube and look for HCI International. You'll find it quite easily. So please be on the lookout for that. So again, we hope that you enjoyed our presentation tonight. It was our pleasure to share it with you. Please be on the lookout for invitation for our next program, which will take place on Tuesday, April 2nd. We have a very interesting program that we are co-sponsoring with the HCI is co-sponsoring with the Higher Purpose Forum, which is entitled God's Dream, Building a Racially Integrated Culture in America. I think you'll find that program also very engaging, very informative, and very timely. So thanks to you all again for being with us tonight. Have a wonderful evening, wonderful morning, wonderful afternoon, wonderful evening, wherever you are in the world.